There's a poem by Tagore. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was duty. Behold, I acted and duty was joy. When I feel like, oh gosh, this is just, that's one of the things that keeps me like, okay, yeah, I get it. Keep going.
Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
So, kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to the Mindform podcast. My name is Frank Lawton. I'm a psychotect, which is a term we have. It means an architect of my own psyche. And I've got a passion for better ways of operating, effective communication, and living wholeheartedly. So that you guys know a little bit about me, and you as well, Ariel, if you didn't know this already. I'm a father and husband. I'm a seeker. I wrote mystic, but my wife said that word has too many different connotations for different people. So a seeker, I'm spiritually curious. I'm a wannabe entrepreneur and a writer and sort of my professional history is in education and mentorship. And a belief that I have with 99% confidence is that our perspectives can always be upgraded, and that with the right knowledge and strategies, there's no cap to human growth. But enough about me. I feel excited and congruent, I would say, about kicking off this new project adjacent to Mindform, which is a psychotecture collective and training platform. Ariel, our guest here, is a member of. The Mindform podcast is a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together through curious and playful conversation. So our guests will primarily be architects, members of Mindform, who have diverse, unique wisdom and a lifelong passion for truth and self-mastery. In each episode, these will be published weekly, will spark conversations to mine gems of wisdom, will challenge our perspectives and collaborate on the general adventure of architecting our minds. Without further ado, today's mind belongs to Ariel Strong. Ariel is a founding member of Mindform, who brings intuitive wisdom, eloquence, heart, and new perspectives to Mindform, from the comment section to the month she led around agency, which was, I'm not remembering the title of the book, but it was all about how we can take our feelings of there's so much going on in the world, what do I do, to a sense that we're responding to it. And woman has a rich psychological landscape that I'm really excited to tap into, because we always have to wait or ask her to speak to hear much from her. And that mind of hers is built from deep introspection and a lot of true adventuring by the sounds of it. Ariel.
Good.
I mean, we
Glad
already
to be
asked
here.
that question. Really cool to have you.
Interesting.
Just before we on, just before I did that intro, Ariel and I were talking about Spinoza, pantheism, all of this stuff, and we're just getting into sort of the distinction between. I was finding it really interesting reading about Spinoza, who was someone who brought in this really new and controversial at the time philosophy about religion. He wanted to keep the idea of God and the idea of religion, but he wanted to rebuild it to be really naturalistic. And Ariel mentioned to me that she takes an interest in that world, but your way of connecting to nature is very much relational, right? It's very, very personal. What would you say? I guess the question attached to that is, what would you say? Do you see nature as personal, as having sort of a character, a personality that you can relate to, or do you see it as a collection of objects?
Well, that's something I kind of go back and forth on. I think philosophically, I'm pretty in line with Spinoza, on that more analytical. But on a personal, intuitive level, I still probably anthropomorphize everything way too much. So I guess my approach is Yeah, I would say I'm a pantheist, but I'm still figuring out just what that means. And I hold a lot of things, we'll probably get into talking about inner work and things like that today. A lot of that stuff I kind of keep in a little box sometimes because it isn't something that I can be logical and analytical about, but I find value in it. But I do question, I question that sort of personalization aspect and how far to go with those sorts of things. So that's something I'm still actively questioning myself on.
Yeah. I want to go back to key thing you said that stood out to me is when you said, um, probably too much anthropomorphizing, because you've said I've also gotten the impression you are someone who's very intuitive, very felt sense in how and how you approach your work, which I would be really keen to talk about because I actually didn't. I'm curious, I don't really understand what it is, but it seems like there's a bit of competition there, right? This tension between perhaps you have a strong instinct for you have a strong instinct, full stop, in how you approach your work and how you approach nature. But then there's this analytical mind that wants to sense of that, reduce that, or tame it, perhaps. Would that be a fair kind of
Yeah,
conception of your
yeah,
experience there?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I can kind of to give people an idea of this is the thing I juggle all the time. I've always been very intuitive, art, music, writing, creative stuff. And then at the same time, I just love science. And I, as a career, I got into computer programming and gravitated to data and analytics and data science. And
Most
so,
opposite,
so
eh?
there's
Yeah.
these,
To some.
yeah, it's like, there's like this, it's like either really right brain or really left brain, to use
I
that
was thinking of that
framing of it.
language. Yeah.
And and I'm always making connections between them, but and I feel comfortable with the analytical stuff because that's something I can talk to people about and explain it and kind of nail it down. The other stuff is just too kind of amorphous. You can't really put it in a jar and analyze it, Um, put it in formaldehyde and say this is what it is. Doesn't work. So yeah. So
Well,
it's a
with your
constant balance.
yeah, I mean it's interesting because in principle, I'd like to imagine that that these two, with left brain, right brain, these two sort of ways of approaching life, of operating, one being very conceptual, reducing it down to its parts, understanding clear rules, and then one that's just this open, felt form of attention that feels motivated and moved, but doesn't quite know why. I'd like in principle to believe that those are inherently collaborative. That the more or the better one side goes, the better the other. And it sounds like maybe in moments you feel that way, but it's clear I think that there's often a tension or a clashing there. To try to a sense for how this can be grounded in our lives or we do, or try to make better sense of it with your work. So you are currently doing a combination of, what did you say? You remind me, but I'll just give you what I remember. Data analytics, drone flying, and like forest fire management all coming together to how create systems that protect neighborhoods from wildfires or something. What's just very briefly,
You're,
because I'm
you're,
more curious about the
you're,
psychological component, but
but
how
yeah,
close am I?
you're on the right track. I'm a former firefighter, EMT, and particularly was most interested in wildland firefighting. Did that for about 5 years. Been a long time ago. But I always missed it and wanted to do something more. Got into the data and analytics and couple years ago, there was a fire that threatened my elderly mother's house. She was ready. Yeah, I was sitting in a room with my team and doing data stuff, and I got a text from her showing the smoke column. She said, "I'm on set status, ready to evacuate." you know, and that was kind of a wake up call. That was about 3 years ago, and I thought, I really like the data and analytics, but I've got to do more about climate change, which the agency meant. The book, by the way, is Active Hope: How to
Of hope.
forget the subtitle. Yeah, by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. I had been reading that, and I decided that I had to find a way to combine my interest in climate change, get the old wildfire stuff back together. And how I put that all together was I went back and got a certificate as a certified wildfire mitigation specialist, got my skills back up to date,
Oh, okay.
and learned to fly a drone, and took the data analytics and the AI stuff that I'm doing now. And I'm doing drone mapping and then analysis to help, like individuals and communities do planning and mitigation work to be more fire resilient in the
Yeah.
within that context.
What kind
So
of
very analytical and outside, back in nature again.
yeah,
And the
it's interesting.
analytics, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously the motivation is inherently you wouldn't be there if it wasn't. Oh, that's my mum. That's people. My heart. What am I
Mm-hmm.
going to do?
Yeah.
At the same time, almost all of that work sounds it's much more the analytical stuff, right? I mean, AI, drones, analytics, and then what when it comes to how you create results for the people you're trying to serve with this work, is that like creating plans for people in terms of how they can anticipate wildfires, how they can respond, how they can strengthen their homes. Like, is it all,
Mm-hmm.
or is it all of that?
Yeah, there's the planning, evacuation planning, pre-planning, planning to how to do mitigation work on a property or in a neighborhood or part of a city to be more resistant or be able to defend against fire better. Make what's called home hardening, uh, to harden a home against actual fire threats, and then to be able to recover after a fire. So it's kind of, yeah,
Holistic
multi
in that way.
stages. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see in any part of the actual work? Do you see what we're calling a right brain or an intuitive? Do you see that kind of thinking as playing a role in how you do this work effectively?
It actually, there is quite a bit of communication stuff. I'm finding there's a lot of psychology behind this. In people tend to procrastinate on doing the kind of work. It's overwhelming. You have a fire in
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah.
area, and or the next town over, and people are afraid. They know they should do something. They think there's something they could do. Hopefully, they're getting the message. But then they have all of the denial that, well, or they kind of take a fatalistic view. If it burns, it burns, or they I've heard all sorts of things, or they think it's going to cost
Uh,
too much, but it really is defense mechanisms. And so I find that a lot of the time I need to act as an educator a lot,
hmm.
and communicate with people a lot, and find out how to meet them where they are, and teach them, hey, there is something you can do. Your insurance, you know, may not do may not be as good as you think it is. Some of these things that,
sure.
the excuses that come up. And so there's the education part and kind of coaching people through the process of, yeah, it seems like a lot. Here's an action plan. You can do these things now and then work these other ones in. So it isn't, so that they don't just hit overwhelm, because, and that's like a lot of inactive hope too. We're
I was
aware
thinking
of
that book's pretty well
climate
done.
change, and it's scary. The things, you see the reports, you learn of what's happening, sort of cascading effects potentially. And here in the Western US, droughts, that kind of thing, some historic drought. So there's a lot of just, human communication stuff that really fits into psychotecture in that sense of talking to people and really listening to where they're coming from and helping them get past fear and that kind of thing.
I'm curious because I mean you're right. I'm mentioning active hope as well. It's a really strong parallel. Everything you're saying about how people respond to the prospect of wildfires, and I think one of the reasons is it's not right there. Like the fire is just like with climate change, right? Like the fire isn't there right now, and so it's like cognitively not very taxing to place yourself in a reality where that's not happening, that's not coming. Um, and then the other
Or
side of it, which
that's
is
later.
exactly, yeah. And then the other side of it, which is, oh, even if it is happening, what the heck am I going to do about it? It's too big, it's too much. It makes me think of like it's like a wrong application of stoicism. It's like, oh well, I'll focus on what I can control, and I'll focus on the present moment. Like, oh, those are great philosophies, but I don't know, in this moment, perhaps you want to think about the future and question what you can and can't control or influence at least. Curious about how you like. What are there some strategies or some particular tools you've sort of come to with doing this work? I mean, you must have had a great number of conversations at this point with families or with homes that you've been engaging with in this work. What kind of tools, strategies have you come up with, or how you are able to move people about this stuff? So obviously, you have the information, you have the data, you have people who need that, and on some level they know they need that. They're talking to you, but
Mhm.
how do you create that movement in them? How do you help them resolve that sense of powerlessness or appreciate the reality? What do you do?
Well, it really boils down to things like, um, there have been studies done. It The people that are, interestingly enough, the people who are most receptive to the fire prevention message are people who've either lost homes or had fires nearby, had to evacuate, know people who've had to evacuate or lost homes. Um, they listen, they know. The people that are harder to reach, and where you have to really get into things like showing the data on, hey, if you do these things to your home, you're, you know, uh, this much more likely to have your home survive a wildfire.
Mm.
And then point out the community part of it too. Um, we all like to see if someone else is doing something before we commit time and energy and money to things.
Yeah.
And I find that having the ability to talk to people who have had the work done and how that's given them more peace of mind is actually more effective than me telling them. It's like testimonials. If they have people, oh, okay, this is another person who owns a home. It's like I have, and they've
Like
done
me.
that, and yeah, someone like me, and they feel better that they've done it. that kind of opens the door for them to consider it more than if I'm just sort of saying, here are the statistics. Because in a way, I'm just a messenger of more fear in a way.
Which is what they're running from in the
Because,
first place. Yeah.
yeah. So there's just, and I'm still figuring it out as I'm going along. I don't think I've got it really nailed down to a science, but I would say the key things are listening to people, asking them questions about, because everybody's a little different too. I've got these general categories that people fall into in terms of their reactions, but um, just really finding out what their particular concerns are. And then that gives me a chance to, tell them about something that might address either their fear or the need they perceive. And again, I just kind of come back to that idea of I'm really more of an educator in a way. I'm not really comfortable being a salesperson. um, even though I am trying to build a business, it's it's got a lot of educational motive and as a service to the community kind of thing. So
Lots of stuff's coming to my mind. Ryan just starts to interesting question in the chat. I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But like, there's this one of the things that came up is you're talking about what it is for you, kind of as opposed to sales. It's educational. It's about listening to these people. It's about connecting people. The term testimonials. Just something that's like an amusing observation to me about that is a lot of what you're saying, even the language you're using, is language that's used like in sales circles. Like I used to do just phone sales for a brokerage company. We would like broker people's power usage out and see what was the best electricity provider. And I'm doing my research at that time. Oh, what's the best way to like tell people this service? And it's testimonials. Listen, what is the person's need? Everyone's really different. Tell your story. Connect clients to each other. Like it's the same thing, which I guess what that really speaks to is that as opposed to what we might imagine sales to be, these personal components, this personal stuff is what actually moves people. This relational, personal stuff, which also takes me back to earlier in the conversation when you're talking about this personal brain versus analytical left brain approach. And a large part of this work is very analytical, but what had you do the work was personal, right? What had you do the work was my mum, something terrible could have happened to my mum, and I have the skills, and so I need to, or I have the knowledge and the experience. So one question would be, do you try bringing your personal to these conversations when you're trying to encourage people, when you're trying to connect people to the importance of protecting themselves for the future and the risk of a fire? Is that do you bring your, do you tell your story? Do you just get vulnerable about this is why this matters to me, this is something that happened to me, so that maybe when they're engaging with you, they're touched in the heart, their personal world or their experience is expanded, as opposed to just feeling like they're absorbing information?
yeah, I do in some instances, and others I don't, and it's kind of a feel thing. It depends on the person I'm talking to. Sometimes I feel comfortable doing that, and other times it just doesn't seem to fit the particular conversation. But it does come up. Yeah.
Right brain thing.
Yeah.
Hard to explain why. Maybe you say what I'd say. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I can imagine. This was Ryan's question here. I'll just read it to you. Seems like it could be an emotionally exhausting line of work. How do you personally cope with the devastation and the people who refuse to take Yeah, so you do that.
Um, yeah, it's. I mean, we've had some big fires here around Flagstaff, just in the last couple years, and I think the community in general is pretty aware. But there are always, you know, I guess I just have to go back to the idea that we all have choices, and some people are going to choose um, to not do something. Some people will, some won't. Um, you can't really override that. I can, tell them my story or give them my viewpoint and hope that they decide to do something before they smell the smoke in the air, because by then it's too late. It's funny. I don't know if other people will find this funny, but one of the things when I was a firefighter, and we would be telling people, you need to be leaving your home or that kind of thing. A lot of people want to stay. A lot of people, and some do. But we were actually trained to tell them, you know, to say this is really serious. It could cost you your life. And if they persisted to say, I'm staying, we would say, you can do that. Um, but we'd like to get the name of your next of kin before we leave. We would actually, you know, to impress on them. That was like our last, you can't drag them, but
Yeah.
I can't do that with my business. That's something that, that's when you're on the ground fighting a fire and you're trying to get someone to
Yeah,
evacuate who
that's when it's
should be
actually
evacuating.
urgent.
But I mean, that is those are the stakes in some cases. And in that, another psychological, what would you call that? A psychological hack that we were actually taught to do that. And that generally got people to, you know, see their eyes get kind of big and kind of like, okay, So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is pretty high stakes, and you can go up to a certain point, and at that point, it's their call, their life, their property. But it's hard working in. Um, I guess that's why I lean on the book Active Hope so much. We see these effects, we see the way things are going, and there is a kind of fatigue that can set in because you feel like you're kind of on the front lines of things, and yet you meet so many people who either can't or won't take it seriously, or they deny that it's a problem, that kind of thing. That's kind of tough.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I anticipate that Ryan in the comments would disagree with this, but that's been how I conceive of depression, and what depression. It's really like when your feeling of depression is what's the point? Where's the point, right? Because you put in work, you exercise your creativity, you do your best, and it's like, and there's all these moments, there's all these examples of, oh, that just didn't do anything, that didn't do the result, and so you give up, you step back. It's like, well, there's no point engaging. I'm expending all this energy. I'm investing my heart and soul into things, and nothing's coming out of it. What's the point in trying? And so yeah, I can imagine that's extremely exhausting, especially when it's something so knowledgeable about, right? It's like you really understand where this is going, and it's so personal to you, and you've engaged with these people at the personal level often as well, right? So
Hmm.
do you just compartmentalize that? How do you navigate that balance of the personal and the personal to cope?
Yeah, it's tough. At the same time, there are a lot of people who do listen, who do take it seriously.
Right.
And I'm part of a whole community of people who do fire prevention and fire suppression. And, we all talk to each other. There's this, I'm not doing this in isolation. But it is something we talk about because it's hard to just keep beating your head against that wall. And I guess that was one of the big takeaways I had. It took me a couple readings of Active Hope to really kind of get that on some level the results are not what matter.
Okay, yeah.
That's getting too hung up on the results because, it may turn out, I don't know, the way things are going, there may come a time where we go, well, there isn't a whole lot else to do. We're not going to say we come to a point where it's like, oh, we can't reverse this. There are these changes. What we can do is only just this small thing. Well, do you give up or do you do the small thing that you can still do?
Absolutely.
It's some people would give up. I'm stubborn, I guess, or just stubborn or committed or something.
That's one way to frame it. Think about though, like you say it is out of your hands, whatever, right? Say that you're in the future, you look back at all of the stuff you're doing with these different people, and or told, or whatever, you see somehow in your hindsight that it basically didn't make any difference. Say that's the case. I mean, I assume it isn't based on the stories you're telling me, but the question then becomes, okay, it's really important to me. It matters, full stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be. How do I feel about being someone who tried, even though it was pointless, or even though there was no fit? That's not necessarily a loss, at least in hindsight, when you look back at your life, right? Like,
Right.
a rage against the dying of the light. That poem. It's like, you'd rather try and fail than not try. It's the same thing as that. So
yeah, it's like, is it a worthy mission? Basically, it win or lose. Is it a fight you want to take on? And I've had other people ask me that, and there's that story of there's a monk who's standing on I guess like a ledge or something, and he slips, and he's hanging there, and he grabs a root, and he's hanging there, and he looks down. There's a tiger below him, and he knows that his weight's going to pull this root loose, in a matter of time. But he looks, and there's a little strawberry right there, and he takes the strawberry and he eats the strawberry. It's like, do you do what's there in front of you and you be in the moment? Or do you keep looking down at the tiger and going, oh my gosh, it's like, do what you can, do what's in your heart, and do what's yours to do, what you feel like it's yours to do. And I guess that's kind of karma yoga in a way. Same concept. Do your duty. There's a poem by Tagore. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was duty. Behold, I acted, and duty was joy.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. Wow. I think I'll keep that.
That's that's one of my things that I carry with me that informs me when I feel like, oh gosh, this is just, That's one of the things that keeps me like, okay, yeah, I get it. Keep
Who's
going.
the author of that poem?
Tagore, I'm not sure the pronunciation. His first name is Rabindranath or Tagore.
Yeah, no, I
It's an
found him. Well,
Indian
yeah, there you
poet.
go. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah, yeah,
it.
wonderful
Kind of
poet.
speaks to like a lot of what we're saying. I mean, you can make a case for it. It's this isn't a critique, but in a way, right? It's inherently irrational. I mean, right? Our actions are to get results, and so they'll fail if we don't get those results. And there's also that sense of there's a um, that duty and joy are opposite. The life that we dream of, like if there's a life that we dream of and hope for, and a sense of what brings us joy, and then there's a real world that doesn't look exactly like the dreams that we have, just to speak to this poem, then those things are different. Like that's and that's very left brain, but I think the capacity to live in that tension, or maybe tension's the wrong word, maybe it's a reconciliation. um it's something you kind of do have to step outside of, to stop thinking, right? I mean, you think of the monk hanging from the branch. When I place myself in that parable, it's not a logical thing. It's not, okay, well, I guess the smartest thing to do then would be to maximize joy in these last few seconds. So what's an opportunity around me? Like, it's look around and you take a deep breath, and and you just allow your heart to sing to you, and you see something that's there, and you allow that to be, despite reality, despite the thoughts and feelings you have about what's going on. And yeah, I think that speaks to that larger experience of yours, or that approach that we're talking about of acting through the magnitude of the problem. Yeah, to me, that's inherently, well, I'm a big picture thinker. I have a lot of ambitious thoughts, maybe more ambitious thoughts than ambitious actions. But I think about, oh, how great could the world be? What are the outcomes? And then what kind of life do I want to be? What kind of path do I walk to get to those outcomes? And it's this inherently, when I get really caught up in that, it's this inherently exhausting thing. It's like, oh, okay, right now I feel like I'm approaching that thing that's good. Oh, right now I'm not seeing evidence of that. That's exhausting. What's the point? Um, and it takes like a felt sense who I am, not an idea of who I am and what I value, but just a felt sense of it that speaks of its own accord, to be able to act joyfully and feel alive, probably act more aligned to what my ultimate wishes are than it's felt for me to be able to do that, despite the picture, I guess, the picture of my life. And that's something that I'm in sort of a very active process of learning. Like, even just this podcast is a great example. Like, so there's okay, well, I want to have a good podcast. I want to have a good conversation. I want a good conversation. But right now we're just connecting, and I'm coming on. And it's just attending to you and hearing your story, feeling like what's interesting to me about that, what's exciting to me about that, and then suddenly I'm just the conversation, and those things, those things aren't on my mind, and I'm able to just enjoy it. I don't know if joy is necessarily a point. Um, yeah, that's why things like presence and felt sense and felt meaning, and the feeling of aliveness are really, really core to my sort of psychotextual missions and curiosities. Is I think there's a power there and a purpose there that can't achieve politically. So I would say.
Yeah, and I think that whole process, we all go through cycles of, what do I want to do, and what, exploring what fits each of us individually, and because it takes time to learn that, and a lot of it is just learned in the day-to-day life and struggles. You learn things that you couldn't, kind of the school of hard knocks, things that you couldn't learn if you were just sitting and thinking about it all the time. You got to get out there and engage and really, it's like, for me, the firefighting, it was a nothing. Everybody thought I was nuts, right? Because at that point I had been a programmer for a while, and I burned out on it, and
Decided you wanted to burn in a different way, huh?
yeah, I call it my jumping from the frying pan into the fire moment.
Yeah.
But it was an intuitive thing. It wasn't anything I had ever really thought about. I was actually in my early 40s, which is kind of hard to get into something like that at that age. I had to physically train and train and train to do it. Um, but it gets back to the nature thing for me. And wildland was always, I did structure and I did EMS, but um, it was the wildland stuff that really caught my attention. It was actually here in Arizona, a lot of the members of the various Native American tribes have fire crews that go out. And I saw, it was a little short documentary interview with a Hopi man that had, he was just about the age I am now, and he was still out fighting fires. Every summer he'd go out. And he'd take a camera and he would take pictures of the various animals they saved and the landscapes and things. And he would take those back to his people when they got back off the season of firefighting. And it was something he shared. And it was one of those strange moments. It just is like, I got to do that. And I did. I can't tell you why it hit me the way it did at that point in my life. But it was one of the highlights of my life to do that for 5 years. And I really had a hard time leaving it because I had a medical issue. I couldn't keep up the training and I couldn't lift like I had before. So I wasn't going to be able to keep doing it. And I thought a lot about it because I went back to programming and I enjoyed what I was doing, but it wasn't the same sense of meaning, and the same kind of, and I wouldn't call it, you said if joy was the right word. It was downright difficult a lot of the time, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. But I never ever had a day that I didn't feel like I never had a day where I felt like I hadn't made a difference. And so there was always meaning in it. And then going back to programming, I struggled to find meaning there. I've now got that meaning back in a different form. And maybe what I'm doing, I will affect or help more people. I don't know. I mean, theoretically, I can tell myself, well, I may be contributing much more by preventing fires or helping people, save their homes by mitigation versus. I don't know how to judge that. I just know that I've got more meaning back in my life after quite some, I was away from it for about 17, 18 years. And there wasn't a day that didn't go by that I didn't think of it and wish I could still be doing it. And now I don't feel that way anymore. I'm back. The meaning is back.
What was the trigger for you? Like, what was the, I mean, you said that, your your mum calling you was a trigger. Um, was that it? Was it just, I'm doing this and I'm not, I don't. There's something that I feel is missing, but I'm here now. This is what I'm doing. Whatever inertia, whatever it is, there's a lot of things that it's a lot of effort to change. And was it your mum called you and something just happened the same in you, like the same way something happened when you saw that documentary, and suddenly it didn't feel like a whole thing to just make a change, to take action, or was there more going on there?
It was definitely a wake up call. It was like, okay, I've got to re-examine my life and figure out how I'm going to be able to do something. At the first point was I was just concerned about her in the moment. Um, and I felt very, very helpless because there was nothing I could do. I mean, I was 3 hours drive away. Um, the situation was happening right then. I couldn't go make any kind of difference at that point. But it was like, there was an awareness of the immediate situation, but also it just it woke something up and I started questioning things in a whole different way. And I didn't have an answer for, I was really working it over in my mind for a few weeks, but by October, I was, well, actually, I got a drone about a month after. I didn't put two and two together until
Drone, you didn't see
later.
the drone as being relevant. That's so interesting.
Not at the time. A few weeks later, it's just a little, small drone. I was kind of in the back of my mind thinking, I had taken a permaculture course, and the guy that taught it had a drone, and he used it to map out. And so in the back of my head, I was thinking about my mom's property and how we could do some kind of permaculture stuff, do some basic mitigation on her property and things. And the drone was kind of a mix of that. But I didn't get the bigger brainstorm for about another month or two afterwards. I went, wait a minute, maps, drones, fire. It started, and it just kind of came, before the light bulb went on. It was a little while.
Life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, it is incredible that seem like these disparate and diverse things to integrate to something that feels so singular and meant to be and whole in this moment in your life. And certainly, I mean, I get the impression, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you feel like this is like a role in the larger picture that you're meant to be playing right now. Would you say that that's?
I,
Would you
yeah,
say? Would you
I
describe a
guess,
situation like that?
yeah. I don't know, meant to be. I don't know necessarily.
Talking about the feeling.
Yeah, the
That's
feeling,
the question, but
the immediate, yeah, not the analysis. The
analysis is
feeling,
fine, just not my question.
yeah, yeah. The feeling was when I finally put those things together. It was, yeah, a light bulb moment. Like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. It was just like a foregone conclusion, like almost like the initial decision to go towards firefighting. I mean, when I have to do this, I didn't even know what that involved at the time. I didn't know what, drones and data and all that stuff. I really didn't know what that was going to involve fully either before that kind of inner certainty of, okay, this is the direction. Yeah.
There's a way that makes no sense. There's also a way that to me makes perfect sense. But this sense that listening to these components of your experience, these feelings, these and just these there's various interests you have, just pursuing them, even if you don't know why you have them or what they're leading to. Taking on board, integrating, and listening to things that you don't understand leads to that can lead to a real sense of clarity and a real sense of certainty, and something that actually makes sense as if it was described or designed or put nicely together. Just that's the feeling sometimes. Um, Interesting. In a way that doesn't make sense. It's like, oh well, don't you kind of have to, if there's a particular outcome, all these things have to be integrated to reach that outcome, then you must need to be able to reason and rationalize which things to choose to invest in it now, so that later on, that outcome is. You need to be able to understand the picture you need to understand the action steps to reach whatever outcome. Although, of course, this outcome is not something you would have anticipated at any point, but it speaks to almost what we were talking about at the start of the conversation. This Spinoza theism, yada yada, this idea of God as nature. That it's, there might be a felt personal component to that, but that, the conventional narratives of God are this kind of beyond reality, or transcending reality, being that knows everything and creates plans and integrates everything, and then sets the course for your life in ways that you can't understand. But I think of this idea of like, if that's our sort of anthropomorphization of nature as a whole, and I think part of the reason we anthropomorphize is because nature as a whole is something that we can't fully grasp or understand intellectually, so we end up understanding it relationally. And we get these, there is a wholeness to nature, there's an integratedness, and we get these different signals that come at us from our unconscious, from our right brain, from our feelings, from experiences of more reality in our lives, and we don't understand, but we pursue these interests. How that does connect us to whatever grander narrative is going on in nature that we don't understand. So in that level, it makes sense. It's we're absorbing pieces of a picture that's bigger than us, and then that allows us to understand the picture. That allows us to connect to the picture. And I think that also speaks to like the core importance of the personal and of the experience when it comes to how do we make our decisions, how do we convince other people make their decisions, and yeah, just how do we approach these different spaces in our life in general, um, to appreciate that relational part and the experience part is to broaden, it's to bring in information that you don't already have, and to bring in components of experience that you don't already have, so that you can things that you don't know, information, ideas. That's engaging with concepts that we hold already, right? It's fiddling around with things that represent experiences, historic experiences. But when we connect to a person and hear their story, when something intense happens to us, when we have an interest, an intuition, a drive that we don't understand, that's something that we haven't already figured out. That's something we haven't already grasped. And so we're able to broaden it, I suppose, and expand our lives in line with something larger. That was fun for me, just taking 4 separate topics in our conversation. Three. drawing a little circle there.
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
I would say to people, just to give some advice, maybe, because there were times where I felt like I was wandering. I didn't, I was programming. Yeah, it was a job and I liked the people and stuff, but I didn't get the same sense of meaning. But I look, now looking back, there's kind of a thread that weaves through it all, that looking back, it makes sense. And I attribute that to being willing to take chances and risks when I had a strong intuition, because even though it didn't make sense in hindsight looking back, I'm glad I did. And there were times where I felt depressed and like, what am I doing with my life and stuff? And I would just kind of hold that out as to people that might have struggle with depression sometimes, or feel like I just don't see where I'm headed. To have faith that bigger part of ourselves, that unconscious part of ourselves, is working under the surface, and just may break through at some point in some way that you just don't expect.
Stay
And
open, eh?
all of a
Just stay
sudden,
open.
stay open and be willing to listen to your intuition, and if it feels right, to go with it, even if it doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas that are coming up for me and personal experiences, but we're just about at the end of our hour.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to close off the call? But that was perfect that you shared that in that moment. And yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, Ariel. That was really fun and interesting
It's
for
fun.
me.
Good talking to you.
I think I'm gonna look a bit more into Spinoza, and so yeah, just think on this. That's a dynamic. How do I do that? How do I listen to my intuition? What's my intuition saying? Just work on that, because it's, I think, not a very organic thing for me. But yeah, you're awesome. I think it's very inspiring the way that you just take that risk. I mean, you must have been the only one of very few women, and definitely the only woman your age who did that in that moment, right? Like, that's rare. Switching into so that's powerful. That's gutsy to leave the inner core with that level of, even though it's, you're not seeing it out there already. So yeah, thanks for an interesting dialogue, Ariel, and
Thank you.
yeah, cheers. Cool. And just for everyone else who's listening or in the comments and stuff, we'll post this recording on Mindform, and I'm sure if you have any questions you want to ask or anything that stood out to you, we can keep the conversation going on there. But otherwise, that's us. We'll sign off. Thanks for allowing me into your mindscape. And yeah. Have a great rest of your day, Ariel.
Hey, thanks, Frank. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io/podcast. I hope to see you inside.